Hello everyone and welcome to First Blood. Yes, it's a Tuesday. Yes, I should be doing trash talk instead. But the guests that we've got on the show tonight have this little thing called LCS to be preoccupied with. So we had to bring it a day forward, and I know you're going to love it anyway. So with me as always is my co-host Brokenshard, aka Wario Shard. We'll talk to him in just a second. But let's introduce the guests. I'm real pleased. We like to do different things. You know, last week we had a comedy roast for no reason. That turned into one of the most ridiculous shows in our history. But now we're back to serious. Okay, it's back to serious. And with us, we've got Carl Cray, a.k.a. Dentist, who's the current coach of Copenhagen Wolves. How are you doing, Cray?
I'm Cray?
Cray, yeah. I'm calling you by your surname.
I'm doing pretty fine, Lewis, so far.
You'll find out why. You'll find out why in a second.
I'm great.
And someone that specializes in people who may be a little bit cray. Huh?
Oh,
Weldon Green.
That was sweet. Okay.
You see what I was doing? Well, Weldon Green, who is a sports psychologist. You're not crazy if you need a psychologist. That's just a joke. It is Weldon Green, the sports psychologist, who also does mindgames.gg. And Weldon, it's great to get you on the show because, of course, you're probably the most qualified and intelligent person here. So how are you?
I'm good. Thanks a lot for having me.
I'm looking forward to it. So what we're going to be talking about today, obviously, is we're going to have some general stuff about coaching in general, some general stuff about sports psychology in general, some stuff about letting the emotions, our emotions get the better of us, which is appropriate with Ram back on the show.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's never going to end. But here's what we'll start with. There was some big news this week, which I'm sure we're all aware of. Was the MYM story, where one of their managers threatened their player with basically seizing his mother's house because she was a co-signatory on the contract. It exposed some sort of internal problems within the team, the way management were treating players, and it all came tumbling out into the open, as these things often do. It raised several debates about player welfare and how organizations handle themselves. Perhaps what was slightly more alarming was the fact that Riot seemed to be aware of the situation and yet hadn't really acted at all to prevent it prior to the report going public. Now, as a coach, someone who has to deal with the hearts and minds of young men, Carl knows about that. Obviously, Weldon as well, being a sports psychologist, he knows about how damaging things like this can be. But I'll start with you, Ram, as you are no stranger to drama and craziness. Is this one of the craziest, most fucked up stories you've heard in the history of League of Legends?
No. It actually isn't.
Come on.
It's actually it's up there. It's fucking up there, but it's not the craziest. But it's pretty fucked up. Like if we want to talk about bad organizations and organizations that suck dick at what they do, then I would be all over that stuff with Dragonborns way back in the day. But I mean, I guess it's not as big of a surprise when it came out because I knew about everything before you posted. But like, one thing I just want to say is that what I thought about when I first heard that Corey had a recording of it is Corey is 17 years old, all right? And it's not an insult to all like the 17-year-olds out there. No one is smart enough to think, this guy is calling me. I better record the conversation. Unless something like that has happened in the past or he's seen it happen to other people on the team.
Yeah.
Like, no offense to 17-year-olds. Like, you don't have the street smarts to think about that or to preemptively record a conversation like that. Like, I can't think, I'm myself at 17 and I'm retarded, like, probably wouldn't have done that. But I'm pretty sure you guys can agree on that. Which leads me to believe that the post that MYM just put, where they said, oh, it was one guy who did it, he's fired, it's gone, we're going to sit down with the players, it's kind of bullshit. Because MYM have had a history of fucking up where they shouldn't be fucking up. Like in their last League of Legends team, in other games, I remember just recently reading an article about a player on a team who just didn't get any money from tournaments or the salaries that they were promised on contracts. And a lot of people were talking about when it came up on Twitter that this was not a one-time thing with MYM. Yes, this is a huge, like, ridiculous thing that happened, like threatening someone's mother's house. Like, what the fuck, first off? And it's not the first time they've heard some kind of shady shit going on with Meteor Makers. I personally thought that they would be asked to leave the LCS, or that organization, whether the players would stay in or not, would not be in the LCS anymore after something like that.
Well, that's certainly the rumor that's doing the rounds at the moment. And there was a Reddit thread the other day as well, which pointed to MYM having taken down their League of Legends section from their website. Which I don't know what that means. It's probably a coincidence. The MYM statement today said they haven't heard anything from Riot, and we all know how trustworthy MYM are. So I'm guessing they haven't heard anything from Riot. We'll quickly jump over to you, Carl. Now, again, I say you're a coach. You are dealing with the hearts and minds of young men. Have you heard of anything this shocking, and what are your thoughts about it, first and foremost?
Well, first of all, like threatening a 17-year-old with like losing his house, or like making him lose his his mother's house, is like disgusting. Like that's just nothing that you would ever do, like regardless of how much money is involved. But besides that, like shady esports organizations, I mean, we're no strangers to that. I mean, we're like 15 years into esports, and we're far from being like the best established industry in the world. So going into esports is always like a risk, and like running into a bad organization is a risk that every one of us takes, like every one of us who signs a contract, and maybe some even don't sign a contract. But the thing is that the whole reaction of Media Makers is like kind of makes it like even more shady, as it already is.
Just like saying big sorry on their fucking Twitter post.
Fucking
like,
big sorry. Fucking big sorry is like it's even worse than by far. Like honestly.
I apologize for starting that.
No, just to clarify. So this is how big sorry actually happened. When Fally, Mr. Rotterdam, sent me his statement, he said, and obviously because he'd been briefed by the CEO to take all the blame and fall on his sword.
It looked like a prepared response. Honestly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he right. What happened was, moments before I got that statement from Fally, I talked to the CEO and basically said, I believe you had some awareness that this was happening, and I think this points to a systematic and endemic problem within your organization of bullying players, because I've seen chat logs where you're effectively grooming your players on what to say, even if it's contrary to the facts. And he said, no, that's absolutely not true. And then moments later, Fally and I get in touch with each other, and he gives this statement where he repeats the mantra that it's all my fault. I did it. The CEOs didn't know. The management didn't know. He repeats this over and over again. And then at the end, I did notice quite distinctly, big sorry. And obviously I thought that's, I had a little chuckle to myself, and I thought, he's not an English native speaker. I should do him a favor and change that. But he specifically said, because he was so adamant for taking the blame, he said, don't change a word of my statement. And I'm like, not even the embarrassing big sorry bit at the end. So I didn't.
But was it a hashtag though? Was it a hashtag?
No, it was just no. He's basically like, I'm sorry for being the biggest scum of the earth. Big sorry. Like,
yeah, big sorry.
Yeah, well, that's close to a hashtag, so I count that as a hashtag. But
I'm glad that you brought that up. That you said that he was grooming it, because if you look at their PR statement that they released just recently, they're basically saying the CEO had nothing to do. Very well, move on. Like, it seemed like that was the central focal point of the PR report, and like.
There's another thing, like coming into this, like before we continue talking, like Richard, if you ever like trash Copenhagen Wolves into the ground, like thank you very much for that. Like just before you even do that.
Yeah, that was a bit funny as well. I did feel like when I saw him thanking me, I did feel like posting our last conversation that we had. Hang on, no. I'll just read you the last part of the exchange actually, because I'm amazed this guy is thanking me, because he certainly wasn't thanking me at the time. So look, I'll tell you exactly how it went down. So I basically said to him that I didn't think he was running his organization in a competent manner. And he said, well, I can now see that everything people say about you is true. And I said, well, your judgments of me are irrelevant. And he went, it's not, though. You're not even a journalist. That's a fact. You're a guy who is writing. That is all. You're not a real journalist, not even a bit. sorry, man. So I told him, my qualifications that I studied and blah, blah, blah. And he went, good job. If you have those qualifications, that's really sad that you're choosing to waste it in this manner. So that isn't, those aren't the words of someone who seems truly grateful, in my opinion.
Well, the joke's on him. Your mom can't move, so you're safe. He can't take your mom's house.
Well,
he will try.
He can take my mum's honor. That's what he can do. Maybe he's going to do that next. Take my mum's dignity.
No, but honestly, like that situation, what's he going to do? Like, if I would be the CEO of Meet Makers and I would be like put in the dirt like that, and I got like I'm threatening, like I have one of my executives threatening a 17-year-old. Like, what's the current reaction? I think there is no correct reaction. Like you just try to like. To prevent the organization from going down completely. I'm
going to bring Weldon in because, as I'd expect from a man of fine breeding and higher education, he sat there quite politely and hasn't interrupted us while we just babble our bullshit. So, Weldon, I will ask you the first question on this topic. First of all, just some general thoughts about it, as a gentleman in your particular field. But
also, well, you have to understand, I'm living in Finland, so I've attracted their kind of like cultural predisposition for silence. But
blend in with the snow.
And saunas and hopefully strong vodka. But
lots of strong vodka. Yeah.
But yeah, so what are your thoughts about this particular matter? And obviously, I wanted to ask you just a little bit about the kind of the kind of barriers we can put in place between you and somebody that is kind of bullying or being a bit overbearing from an organizational perspective. If there was a 17-year-old future pro listening to this, what advice would you give them to sort of deal with that situation?
Right. So I think, I come from mainstream sports, and I think that sport attracts this kind of mentality. I mean, you see this if you look at American baseball before there were player unions. And I mean, even nowadays, you'll just see so much player abuse and bullying, especially in the farm leagues. And I actually got into sports psychology because of bad coaching and bad management. So, I mean, down in the amateur sports, like at the college level where I was performing, there weren't these kind of checks and balances. And so there was a lot of abuse happening because of power situations. And I think in esport, there's this feeling, because it's such a new field, that there's this one pie, and if somebody takes a piece of that pie, then they're taking it away from you. It's like a chance that you lose. And so everybody's scrabbling for every little bit they can get, and it gets very like animalistic. So from a holistic, like systemic view, I think that this is just going to happen. And the only solution is the evolution of player unions, in my opinion. I really like what Snoopy has been talking about doing, where he's kind of pushing player representation and education. And I think that ultimately that's going to turn into players forming together and paying into a pot where they hire a lawyer that they can then use in any situation. I don't think it'll be unions where like they're pushing for certain wages and stuff like that. But unions started as just a way to hire a lawyer that they could then call pretty much whenever. And I think that would be really useful for somebody, like Corey in his situation. If he just had somebody he could call for advice and ask, hey, can they really take my mom's house away? And what would I recommend for the aspiring pros? I think get that Skype auto record feature. I mean, it should just be that every single call that you have with any potential manager or with your coach or anything should always just automatically record, and you can decide later if you want to delete it, because that's the only way to protect yourself. I'm
just done with fucking recordings right now.
Are there not any legal ramifications? I mean, this again, it seems absurd to me, but someone brought this up at the time that had this taken place in America, the fact that he recorded somebody without their permission. He himself would have been committing a misdemeanor.
No, it would have no value. Like, it would have had no value, as far as I know. Like,
I don't know if it would be admissible.
Well, sure, they could take it to like a civil court or something, but like the recording is more for the populist court on Reddit. That's where you're going to protect yourself in this sphere, and it doesn't really matter then if the guy sues you or not, because he won't be working for MYM anymore. So, Problem solved.
And just finally, before we kind of throw up a bit more of a general topic of conversation, if you were making this decision, Weldon, would you say the only way to really make amends with this would be to remove MYM's right to have a team in LCS? Do you think the punishment needs to be that stern? Or do you think the fact that the person who made the threats has been dismissed by the organization is sufficient to satisfy the concerns any of us would have?
Well, I think if we look at the sheer, I mean, if we take it in perspective to what happens in mainstream sport, where you have physical abuse, as well as sometimes sexual abuse, as well as like illicit steroid administering without permission, like these things can get really extreme.
Yeah.
And so a phone call where you're coercing somebody based on information that maybe they could, double check or verify or second guess isn't way up there in terms of crimes against humanity. And I actually don't think Riot should be policing this situation. I think that they screwed up not letting Corey play in the North American challenger scene in the first place, because where does the player go if he doesn't have, if he thinks that his contract is being violated on the other end, and then Riot's enforcing the contract onto him. So then
just to defend Riot here, there were some conflicting reports about that. It's never been made clear whether Riot had said that or not, because the source of information for Corey was from within MYM. MYM had said that Riot had put the ban hammer down and were preventing him from moving to Raw. Actually, other people at Raw were saying that it would have been okay. But of course, they've got a vested interest to kind of tell a few fibs themselves. So no one's clear. Riot haven't come out and said which way they went. So that's just to defend Riot before we throw them under which I rarely do.
Sorry, go ahead.
And from the conversation that Corey had with Riot, or like with Nick Allen, who's been like forwarded to Scott, like if he contacted Riot like earlier, maybe this could have gone better. Like, because it was like, what's the first thing that you're gonna do? You contact Riot, because Riot is the only organization that can actually take the contract and say, okay, it's not valid anymore, and you are free to move. Like, doing this on your own is like kind of stupid. Like, you should always, and Riot is open-handed to those kind of problems, and they really are.
That's why that the player union or someone, a different entity that isn't Riot, needs to be available for people to approach and ask for help, because Riot should not be the ones doing that kind of stuff. They have a huge conflict of interest that was said multiple times by the esports lawyer, by Snoopy, by lots of people who are more well-versed in law than I am, that Riot, while it's good that they're kind of the people that we turn to, because the way that Riot like to do things is that they like to have total control, which as a result of having this total control, they're the ones that teams essentially turn to. What else? And the problem is that everyone turns to Riot when this MYM debacle and say, why haven't you done anything yet? Or why haven't you done anything? Because Riot needs to be super, super careful about what they do and where they stand, because, again, it's a huge conflict of interest. And I don't think Riot wants to be that entity that's responsible for, esports law in between teams. Because the fact of the matter is, say I was on Team Solo Mid, right? The relationship that I have between me and Team Solo Mid is different from the relationship that I have with Riot. My relationship with Riot is that I play for their league, but my relationship with TSM would be I am signed to TSM. They don't necessarily have any say in what the contract between me and TSM, they don't have any say in what happens in the middle of that contract. The only real thing that they have say is that I am playing LCS under said organization, and I'm receiving a certain amount of money from Riot, which is what they pay the minimum amount to players. They said they have a listed minimum amount from money that Riot give to the organization per split. It's like 12,500. That's the only real thing that they have say in, that you need to be receiving that money. Besides that, anything in the contract between me and TSM is up to me and TSM. Riot should not be the ones stepping into that contract, because that's a legal documentation. The importance of someone or an entity or a group of people who are very well versed in esports law to be there for issues like this is what really needs to happen, because you don't hear about it often. Only big stories like the MYM Corey, but stuff like this happens like all the time. And because the reason it happens all the time is because people don't know any better. And it's not their fault that they don't know any better. It's that there's literally no one they can turn to ask for advice or legal opinion.
That's just the thing. I think that education is the key. And I think that Riot brought on a bunch of NFL production people when they wanted to up their production. And I think they could do the same thing with their infrastructure building. I think that these fines that they levy against organizations, like in mainstream sport, usually they're turned back into professional education grants. So like somebody who runs a conference for coaching development can get a grant from the NFL to host that conference, and teams can get grants from the NFL to send their coaches to that. So that's what I would like to see, is fines levied against teams that do these things, and then those fines put back into education and people who are trying to start educational initiatives for coaches, management, and players.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I just want to sort of move the conversation forward a little bit because obviously we've got lots to cover, and I don't want to keep you up all night, especially you, Weldon, because I know you've got an early start. And again, we are graced with your appearance. So we'll move on away from Big Sorry Gate. I feel we can put it behind us. The one thing I will say is, just as a couple of points of information, I've just had some conversational logs sent to me, which show unequivocally that Riot had actually said Selfie could play in the Challenger Series because they don't enter into contracts with those teams. And it was MYM that were basically lying and misleading the player about his ability to do that. And because he was torn between listening to Raw and listening to MYM, and MYM have done this grooming number on him, he obviously decided to listen to the latter, and therefore ended up coming back to MYM when in fact he would have been fine to play for Raw. So there we go. And the other thing, of course, is that Riot will be making a statement about this entire matter, about this entire debacle, and I certainly hope they get it right. Because this is going to set a very big precedent. It's a bit of a milestone, I think, in League of Legends history. So let's hope that they do get it right for all future pros' sake. Now, talking about pros, let's jump in. Player behavior checks, coaching behavior checks. Riot obviously do like to put checks and balances in place when it comes to people that operate within their league, which makes the fact that this has happened, in my opinion, all the more shocking. They'll go through someone's solo queue history and see if they flamed, but they don't seem to look too closely at organizations and their behavior or managerial qualifications. For a team that's going to be competing in their league, they seem to be focused on very minor and trivial things, for my mind. So this is where I'm going to bring you in, Carl. As a newly appointed coach, and yes, you look absolutely gorgeous on stage in your suits. What sort of checks did you have to go through to be cleared to be a coach? What suitability have Riot determined you to have in order for you to be allowed to do it?
There was like this normal player behavior check, and that's kind of strange to me because, and this whole the whole checks are kind of strange if you ask me, because what do you have to pass in order to become a player? You have to be good, obviously, at least decent. And then you have to have a clean solo queue history when it comes to flaming, and I don't know, as clean as possible. Yeah, as clean as possible. And what tests do you have to pass in order to become a manager in esports? No, I've heard stories of the only qualification of a manager was that he had a World of Warcraft guild, and that's if you ask me, that's no qualification. You're doomed to fail if you hire people who have no background knowledge about management, call it human resources. If they don't know how to talk to people, if they don't know how to set up contracts, how the fuck are they supposed to succeed in their job? And that's where esports fails, because it's right now it's the same as it was 10 years ago. What do you have to do to become a manager of an esports organization? You have to say it. That's all.
Yeah,
it was 10, 15 years ago, it was the same as it is now. You just come into the scene and say, okay, I'm the manager of Meet Your Memes, and congratulations, you are.
It's move
Like,
your mothers. Move your mothers.
move your mothers. Yeah.
Move your
and,
mothers.
and right now it's like absolutely the same. So the players have to pass all those tests, and if they are good, if they are bad, like I'm not the one to judge. Like I had no problems in like passing the tests, and I don't think that any players ever had, unless you do like a huge fuck up, like DDoSing people or going like super aggressive and going super full racist. But like what tests have managers to pass? Like, isn't that the point where Riot should do something? Like,
Well, yeah, but this is exactly what the reason I'm asking. I've always found it incredibly strange the things that Riot focus on. Like always, they're fixated on control. We know that much. Their behavior speaks for itself. Yet for me, they don't look to control in the right areas. Like for example, I don't like a coach who is essentially employed by an organization being the beck and call, having Riot having dominion over whether they can have a job or not. I think that's actually quite a dangerous precedent. It's the organization that should determine whether you're suitable.
Well, it's an on-stage character. Like coaches have been into League of Legends for like.
But that's the only reason you guys are on stage. What they've done is they've subverted it in a way that enables them. Sure, they offer money as well. They offer money, but the key change they made was insisting that you were on stage, insisting that you become part of this character. That is the right word, in the broadcast narrative. And by doing that, they therefore have now given themselves a means and a right ultimately to control, because you've become part of the broadcast experience. And I think that's ridiculous, when actually the proper people's check is what needs to happen. And for people that don't know about that, we've got something in the Football Association over here in England where if you want to own a club, you have to go through a proper people's check. They check your financial history, they check your criminal background, they dig up as much dirt on you as they can to determine whether or not you're going to be a detrimental or negative influence on the league as a whole, on the sport as a whole. Now, that for me makes sense if Riot were doing things like that. But on this, micro level, this bizarre fixation with, did a coach flame in solo queue? Is this coach a drama magnet? These are the things that they seem interested in, not whether actually someone's going to be doing anything, detrimental in the bigger picture. Weldon, I'll just bring you in on that point. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think that there's a different perspective in the EU and the North American work environment. Like in the EU, I've noticed that, since I immigrated here, that there's just a larger emphasis on qualifications from the university than there ever will be in America. Like in the US, if you have experience, that's the only thing that matters. They don't even care about degrees. So if you have something like I was a World of Warcraft guild manager, like it weighs more than whatever your bachelor's in business is. But I think like looking to the future, if we're thinking more, I'm always looking at the infrastructure, because in sports psychology we do a ton of research on sport and infrastructure and even sport management. And I think that farm leagues would solve a lot of this problem. Like right now, we kind of started backwards as a sport. We started with the professional scene. We have nothing below it supporting that. And now it's possible to make a living in the challenger scene and have an org and have the kind of funding that you need to run a team. And like that's going to happen maybe even one level lower if we keep going down. And so there will be an entrance point for all of these professionals to go in and manage smaller teams, and coach youth sport at their, in their town or at the high school and work their way up. And then when you go to manage a big team, like they're going to be able to pick the creme de la creme of coaches, because they're going to have thousands of coaches that have experience now, or thousands of managers that have experience. And so really right now there's just a lack of selection, because there's a lack of places to get this education and experience. And so I really think that what I want to see is Riot putting a lot more structural support for creating the farm leagues, especially Division 2, which they have kind of running now. I'd love to see more broadcast emphasis put on that. And maybe even a little financial support, although I'm not sure that's necessary. And where's the Division 3? Like, what's the plan for how to take this to the youth sport level, which is where actually life skills for athletes get coached for the first time at the youth skills level, and that's where people can go to manage their first team and coach their first team.
But this is again an interesting point that I want to bring up, and again, anyone can pitch in on this one. I know Riot do provide forums and seminars and conferences for owners and players alike, where they get briefed on certain things. So, for example, there was an owners conference. It's quite famous and well referenced now, where they brought up issues surrounding like how can we work together to make better content? How can we work together to stop people leaking stories from within your organization? There were numerous private conversations with team owners that were basically advising them how to stop independent journalists getting a hold of information. Now, maybe that's important, but I can't help but feel if you're going to get people in a room, there's probably more pressing concerns to talk about.
It's such a capitalist perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a business.
And it's the same for players. One of the problems we have as an independent show that frequently goes off message is that we struggle to get guests on because if there's anything topical that's happening that they can't talk about, Riot brief them and say, you can't say this, you can't say that, don't talk about this, don't do that. And I think that's great. It's great that you're trying to help manage PR, even if it isn't altruistic. It's your PR you're worried about, not theirs. But why aren't we having meetings about, hey guys, how's things in the team? Any issues? Why can't we put conferences together for things that are fundamentally more important?
And that's the reason. Like when you put all those managers and team owners into one room, and the only topic that you're going to talk about is how to stop independent journalists from leaking your dirt, then you're making something seriously wrong.
Yeah, but I mean, we saw Crepo when he parted ways, from Evil Geniuses, saying we had a manager who basically had us sleeping in a doorway, or of a room. Like there was someone that didn't even have a bedroom.
Altec.
Yeah,
Altec had to sleep at the bottom of a. Altec had to sleep at the bottom of a staircase because Snoopy and Yellow Pete were still living in the house on full pay, because he didn't want to go up to them and tell them to leave because he was too scared, was the exact quote that I got from a few of them. It wasn't just Crepo said it, was like 3 other people from that group said the same thing about that.
So, with that in mind, if we're going to get players together and we're going to talk about stuff, it's great that you want to tell them what they can and can't say, what they can and can't stream. That's brilliant for you, Riot, but if you're genuinely interested about improving the welfare of your players, which they claim to be, if you're genuinely concerned about improving esports as a whole, then surely these are the kind of things you should be asking about. We saw Team Mon had problems as well. I mean, I'm sure there have been numerous examples of players that are just thrown into a team house and effectively left to their own devices with no form of supervision by anyone that has a duty of care for them. Why isn't there a player welfare officer at Riot that actually is having these conferences rather than someone who's absolutely fixated on whether you'll come on a show like First Blood and say something controversial? Do you think they have an obligation there, Weldon? Because I know things exist like that in real sports from my time as a sports coach.
I think that a lot of those conferences are independent organizations that sprung up and started those. So I have a very optimistic view of esport development. Like, I think those things are coming. For example, I myself am planning on, in 2016, if I can wing any of my profits out of my esports psychology consulting, I'm going to roll it back into trying to develop this kind of coach training conference that we can hold maybe, in Europe, and players or teams can send their coaches to this. So like that, it's going to come from the people who are sick of these kind of behaviors and just start independent conferences and independent organizations that are like Snoopy, that are dedicated to this kind of stuff. And then it's on Riot to kind of support that, to say, hey, this is great. How can we help you? Can we have somebody on our staff who liaisons with you constantly, gets you what you need? And can we make it can we organize this into a licensure system, an independent licensure system, where coaches have to go through this kind of certain number of hours of practical training at one of these conferences before they can make it in. So I think that that's how it will develop eventually. As far as like stopgap measures, I think what you said about having a player welfare or well-being liaison at Riot. That's just such a great idea. I mean, it just gives somebody a phone number out there on the website. Like, just call this guy anytime.
That sounds like no offense. It sounds like children's services for like problematic
abused,
but
abused families.
Yeah, I know. It sounds a little bit strange because we're meant to be talking about young adults.
I don't think it sounds strange. I think it just sounds like pretty much like if we thought about it, each team is like a family, and each CO is like the dad, and each Rotterdam is like the drunk mother that beats the kids. Then having that number or that person that you could liaison, that's basically the responsibility is to make sure that the organizations are on top of the team's needs. That's a good thing, but does Riot really want that responsibility?
Well,
yeah, but think
sure
about
they
this.
don't. Sorry, go on, Carl.
Think about this. Like, you talked about like the CEO of the company being the dad. Like, there's a difference in if you have a dad who's like 46 and who's like stable in life, and you have a dad who's like 22 and went too far on a fucking weekend. Like, there's a huge difference in that. So right now, if you look at the esports, like if at all the esports organizations who are in the LCS, like there are differences from day to night when it comes to like managing players and like organizing certain structures. Like there certainly is, and I know, Ram, you know this better than I do because you've been in some of them. So
I've been in some really bad and some really good. So yeah.
If you go at the top, like the top management, like the top managed companies and organizations in esports, like everything goes just smooth. Like the players don't have to worry about anything. They come into that environment and it's perfect. It's 100%. And then you got other organizations where you come in as a 17-year-old and you're like, the fuck is this? Like, what am I even supposed to do? And in those situations, there Riot has to do something. Like, they don't have to worry about Fnatic.
I think this just stems down all the way back to educating players in what a real organization should be doing, rather than trying to change how organizations work. Okay, all right, let's take one example. Let's compare something like Team Dignitas to Dragonborns, right? For example, on one hand, you've got leading one of the best organizations in the world, success in many games, many sponsors, successful for long periods of time, and you got Dragonborns. Like, it doesn't take a lot to know the difference between the two, but we know this now. When I was coming in, I had no idea that Dragonborns was going to shit the bed the way they did, right?
Well, tell me about the Dragonborns thing. You brought this up twice. What the fuck happened, Ram? Because I mean, I don't know.
You don't fucking know?
Well, look, I mean, I didn't even think Dragonborns were an organization per se. They just seem to be a bunch of players clinging on to the last strokes of the fucking League of Legends dream. That's what it seems.
TLDR, Dragonborns was an organization that was started by Shushay, basically like the team captain, but he wasn't really the owner, or he might have been. I don't know exactly. But there was another guy that was the CEO, and they were an organization before we made LCS. When we made LCS, they were the organization of the team. They basically fucked up getting them a gaming house, fucked up with sponsors. No one had gear. The gaming house was absolute shit when I came to visit it. There were no PCs. I remember Yamato Cannon, who was a player there, played in the gaming house on the floor on a MacBook. That was what they practiced on. And I think they owe Maluno, if anyone remembers Maluno from the way back then, they owe him like
I do.
$1,200, $1,300. They owe Extinct a certain amount of money as well because he was contracted. They owe me about $2,400. They owe Yamato Cannon like $1,000, and basically the organization CEO just ran off, like disappeared after DB got relegated. The organization plummeted, like they were basically like it was done, and then slowly people from the organization began disappearing, and I don't mean like someone was actually killing them. They just like cut contacts, and then the organization owner, who I was in contact with for like 2 or 3 weeks around this period of time, it was I think October of 2013, asking him where the fuck my money was that I was promised by contract, just disappears randomly. So basically, it was an organization, an unexperienced organization, trying to do something in LCS, failing miserably, taking a team down with them, and then just like fucking off when they still owe people money. That's the Dragon story.
You can tell we've got some wonderful neckbeards in the Twitch chat as well, because there's people saying the fact that he had to practice on a Mac is worse than anything MYM did to Corey. They're saying that's horrible. This is like just the worst thing that could possibly happen to anyone, having to use a MacBook.
I'm just saying that, like, I'm just saying that
beta client, right?
Yeah, but those things still happen right now. Like, it wasn't just.
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, that actually sounds quite typical for a new organization entering the LCS.
And no. I like there are differences. For example, I know for a fact that Unicorns of Love, like their manager, team coach, owner, I don't know, Shibi, he's like a fucking great dude. Like, he's one of the nicest dudes I have ever met. Like, seriously, in esports so far. And he's like, he's doing this all on his own. Like, he was a former player going into management and coaching the team as of this season, and apparently also the owner. And he's getting his shit together. Like, they're marching forward, and they will stay strong in LCS. Like, it can go, like, it can work, but it's not supposed to work, I guess, this format. Like, all this...
It's just more so that there needs to be, rather than this liaison thing, because I'm pretty sure that Riot don't want to have this kind of stepping on your toes responsibility, another entity does need to be formed to educate younger players, not just younger players, just older players, like a consulting firm or organization that helps these players make the right choices. Because in esports, the right choice and the smart choice are almost very difficult to make. Like, it's very difficult to know who has your best interest, because the truth of the matter is that like 90% of the time, the person you're talking to doesn't have your best interest. They have their best interest. And sometimes their best interest involves you not being around anymore or fucking you over. So, like, now it's gonna happen in almost any industry. Like, these people exist everywhere. It's not a unique thing that it happens in esports only. But instead of trying to stem out these people, just make them irrelevant by helping the players make the right decisions.
Weldon, just getting back to the player liaison point just before we cut to a break. I mean, again, you're from a sports background, a mainstream sports background. You know, I coached at a junior level, and I coached, interestingly enough, a female rugby team in my time. And you know, I think there were, again, those checks and balances were in place. There were people you could call. There were organizations that, say, for example, if I'm coaching females, if I act in an inappropriate manner, there was a clear chain of an escalation process, I should say, that they could follow. If they ever felt threatened or intimidated or anything else, but by me as their coach. And it seems a very easy thing to put in place, especially for an organization with Riot's resources. I'm talking about local level sports, grassroots sports. Can you tell us what kind of things you've seen in place that are similar to that?
Well, I think it comes down to just what you said, that there's this grassroots educational approach to sport. To modern sport, at least. Modern sport is very different from how we've practiced sport throughout history as humans. But in modern sport, we have parents who believe that, like, sport is this moral authority where you go to develop these kind of like life skills. And then we have this player development sequence that happens starting from the age of 5 or 10 or 15, where you go in and you start learning, sacrifice, and you start learning these skills. And then you get up to the school level. And you're getting prepared. I mean, the people who go into the college and start into the college system and start signing these kind of contracts, they have almost a decade of sport experience on teams or with coaches to draw on. And on top of that, they have usually their parents' advice. And esport players, like, it's not a legitimate, it's not seen as a legitimate moral development course yet for parents. So they're just like, oh my gosh, why is my kid playing video games? They don't see the transition when they go from like a video game player to esport athlete. So they aren't getting behind that. They aren't helping them make those decisions. And then we don't have this player development where, I mean, they're getting thrown into a decision with an organization that is seriously about money. You're going straight from nothing to the big leagues because there's nothing in between. So, of course, these organizations, everything is about money. I mean, if you look across the world, almost every decision that humans make is economic. So, of course, these orgs are making their decisions based on money. That's just the fact of sport at the highest levels. Yep. And So as long as we have players that are thrown from nothing into that, we're going to have this problem. And the solution is to just build up the infrastructure below that, so players can get more and more experience encountering teams that have their agenda in mind, and not so much the money agenda in mind.
Okay. Well, look, what we'll do is we'll cut to a break there. We are going to talk about some LCS stuff, but when we get back, we're going to talk to our coach and our sports psychologist about what they do for a living, going over a typical day, what they bring to the table for an organization. For example, Carl here likes to hold empty books or sheets of paper with "Please win" written on them, which I understand is how you win games.
It's hard work.
I was just like watching behind and like in back of Carl's screen of like the CW guys messing around. Like, Carl, why don't you just tell them if they spent more time practicing than fucking around, maybe they'd win a few more games in the LCS. I don't know.
Hey,
I have no
guys.
authority. I have no authority here. So
you're not actually a coach. You're just in it for the memes, aren't you?
I'm doing the dishes. Yeah.
Yeah, you're there. So everybody knows that Carl isn't actually a coach. He's just there as a public figure to meme on stage of the LCS.
He is the greatest memer of all time.
Okay. So for those who don't know, by the way, a lot of the Photoshop pictures that you saw of First Blood.
Are you kidding me? All of them.
Most of the 99% of the Photoshop pictures were courtesy of this man right here. This is Dentist, the guy who
made now he's in trouble.
The most amazing Photoshop pictures in like the world, and now he can't do it anymore because it's an LCS. So everybody needs to flame him now on Twitch,
and he won't be able to retaliate.
No, he can't.
Maybe I will do one last meme for Wonder Game though.
I wish you'd never started that one.
One last meme for Wonder Game.
But anyway, we will cut to the break. Like I said, we're going to talk about some general stuff. We are going to talk about LCS. I do promise you, we're going to try and do it a bit more, rapid when we come back. We'll be about 5 minutes while everyone gets watered, and we advise that you do the same. And we'll see you then. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to First Blood. Yes, you will have noticed the All-American Fusion's MVP was lurking there with the American flag during the break. Just to give you an update on Josh's status, obviously, he's not been co-hosting the show for a while due to health problems. He's doing really well, hasn't had any more recurrences of the seizures that have been fairly well publicized on social media. He's adapting to medication, and we're hoping to see him back on the show sooner rather than later. It would be great to get him on again. But he appreciates all the support from all the First Blood fans, and thanks you all. And indeed, I'm sure our guests are all wishing him well as well. But talking about guests, we're going to throw over to Weldon. Sports psychologist, we did mention that a few times, but a sports psychologist operating in what must be a very strange and at times terrifying industry to be applying your knowledge and skill set to. So let's talk a little bit about you, what you do on a daily basis, and what you think you bring to the esports table.
Okay, I think the first question I need to address is, am I a sport psychologist? Because in a lot of countries, the term psychologist is actually protected. You need to have a certain, you need to have either a PhD in psychology, or you need to have a psychiatric medical license and be able to deal with, so mentally disabled people or medical issues. Yep. And I have a master's of science degree in sport and exercise psychology. Now, in North America, I wouldn't necessarily call myself a psychologist. I would call myself a psychological skills trainer, because the term psychologist is licensed for psychologists.
Yeah, right? we had this when we talked with our lawyer as well. It was like, I can't call myself an esports lawyer. I'm an attorney that has a... Right. Yeah, because, again, all these licensed and protected terms. Yeah.
Now, there is an organization in the U.S. called American Association of Sports Psychologists, and they're licensing the term sports psychologist. So if you go through their program, you can call yourself like a licensed sports psych. In Europe, they're starting to develop similar systems. So like in Finland, I'm going to go through the licensure system, and I'll be able to call myself a legitimate sports psychologist. But as of now, like for example in Germany, because I don't deal with medical populations, I can't use that term.
Right.
So I'm a performance enhancement, performance optimizer, esports psychologist.
That
I can
sounds
say
like
that.
Viagra. You can't. You can't
esports,
say,
I help you get the amount
I don't want to
of
call you a
arousal you need to
performance
perform.
enhancer.
Yeah.
In esports,
I have
we call
plenty of
that
them on
hype,
my
by the
shelf
way.
just here. Like,
And we do talk about, arousal before a match, how to get that emotional edge. So
Jesus
He does
Christ.
great with that. He does great with.
here we go. Ram's
they're-
in. Ram
they're-
leaning
they're-
forward. Really?
I'm sorry, what now?
You can
You're
help
telling
me
me
with that?
I can play League and be hard at the same time?
Yeah, that's basically what we're working for the last 4 months now. Like it's just like 1%
their
psychology
arousal
and
going out.
99% enhancement. Like
Like 99% of them just jerking off right before the match, I assume, right now.
yeah.
Right. So back to non-erectile matters.
So what- Yeah.
do
So what
continue.
is sports psychology? It's two things really, and there's a huge divide between them. It's a research field. So there's a ton of people doing research in sports psychology that don't practice it. And we research everything from talent development, how to recognize players, who are going to be amazing when they're young. We research culture in sport. We research infrastructure in sport. We research player transitions into retirement. And then, of course, we do lots of research on performance optimization, like choking and training. And then the practical field focuses a lot on two things, which is learning a motor skill and then not choking in performance. So learning a motor skill, essentially all the things you can do in training to make your training more effective. I mean, if you know anybody who plays golf, you're probably familiar with the phenomena of somebody who kind of gets pretty good and then they get really into it and they play and they play and they play and they never get any better. They plateau. And this is not because of a talent issue or like an inner, like I was born to be a golfer kind of phenomena, but rather it's because people train ineffectively most of the time. Most people do almost everything ineffectively. They try to do things more efficiently and quickly, but they don't do them more effectively for learning. And so sports psychology, in the practical sense, is trying to take that training situation and make it more effective so that every minute you spend on training is better than the minute Faker is spending on training, which might enable you to catch up to him someday. But as it is, like you're both just spinning your wheels half the time, so he's always going to stay ahead of you. And then we, of course, focus on in the game, like how do you keep from choking? And how do you keep performing at your optimum, whatever your optimum is that day? And I think Michael Jordan is a famous example of this. Somebody asked, how are you always in the zone? And he said something like, I'm not always in the zone. I just always play like I am. And so that's kind of the approach.
So what do you do? What do you do then? Give me an example, like, because this always happens. It's like a party trick, right? I even talked with Sam before we came on air, and what I was going to do was I was going to pretend that I didn't understand that, sports psychology and being a psychic wasn't the same thing. And I was going to just repeatedly troll you by going, so read my mind now. What am I thinking now? And every time you couldn't do it, I'd be like, yeah, you're a sham. And that was going to be the gag. But we decided not to do that because we thought serious show. But I know whenever you give your, credentials, at a dinner party or whatever, someone always goes, oh, really? Well, I play golf and I need to work on my swing a little bit, Weldon. When, I've choked a few times. Can you give me some pointers? So, I kind of want to go down that route and, talk about a typical exercise or an example you would give to a player with choking issues?
So I work with teams in two ways, group workshops and one-on-one training. And in the group workshops, we have group skills that we can train together. So for example, let's talk about training effectiveness. You learn something new when you do something that is different. So let's say you just started playing League of Legends. And you're going to buy an item and you're going to walk to top lane for the very first time. You learn a lot when you're doing that because this is the first time you've ever done anything. And and then 1,000 games later, you just buy stuff and you walk to top lane and that's all wasted time. You don't refine it. because you're just going through the motions. And then you're in lane and you're kind of like CSing and you're not really learning that much because you've CS'd with this character thousands of times. And then all of a sudden you have a trade that's never happened before because you have a new lane opponent. Now you're learning again. So there's this curve that happens when you're starting out playing a game. You learn a ton. And as you get more and more elite at performance, you learn less and less and less every time you train, simply because you don't encounter these new experiences. So how would you encounter a new experience and force yourself to learn when you're going to lane? Well, I like to reference Faker a lot because I think he does this well. I think he's the best because of this attribute of his training, not because he was born to be the best League of Legends player of all time. So he came over here for the season, was it season 3 Worlds? Shoot. Yeah, okay. And he jumped in American solo queue and he went nuts playing Riven. And you can go back and look at the VODs on YouTube. And essentially what he did, so he was walking to lane, and he didn't just walk to lane. He would do his first 2 jumps of Broken Wings, and his 3rd jump, he would always jump over something, a turret, a wall, whatever it may be. So he was constantly practicing that skill as he went back to lane. He wasn't just walking back. And then he would also time his back, so he would wait at the inner turret till a minion wave would come, or spawn, and he would walk back with the minion wave, and he would use his skills to dodge back and forth through the wave. So he was practicing, creep blocking. Why does he not get creep blocked? It's not luck. And then when he got to lane, he would immediately start trading. So he didn't really care about, like, am I going to win the lane? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? He just wanted as much experience dueling as possible. And when he would force the person out of lane, he would walk into the jungle and start trying to find the jungler and start dueling him. So it was nonstop combat, and he just wanted that experience. And I saw a game where actually Riven was banned and he played Syndra, and he did the same thing. So he was walking back to lane. What do most people do? They save their mana, right? Because they want to get back to lane and they want to beat the person that's in the lane. He doesn't have that mentality. He wants to be the world champion. He doesn't give a crap about who he's up against. So all the way back to lane, he's practicing his combos. He hits his Q, he throws it out, and he immediately throws the stun. There's no target. There's nothing to do, and he's wasting his mana. It's very inefficient for winning the lane, but he doesn't care because he's practicing his timing, and that's all that mattered to him. And so those kind of little tricks, I mean, they sound like tricks, but actually, if you look at a bunch of players, you can easily have them set goals in a game that make the average that they always do strange again, to make it new again, to make it learning again, and to find those minutes in the training that you're wasting and turn them into drills. If you look at football practice, it's just a bunch of drills. You start out with a warm-up drill, then you do a bunch of wall pass drills. I mean, you're familiar with this from rugby. And then you don't do a lot of scrims, because in scrims, you're standing around half the time. You don't have the ball. You're just practicing strategy. Most of the time, you're doing drills. So we don't have a sandbox mode in League of Legends. We can't do drills all the time. And so I have to find ways to create drills that the coaches can do. So I work with coaches and players at effectively making every scrim into a drill as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you bring that up, and this is another reason why sandbox mode is going to be important, and I think help take coaching to the next level in League of Legends, because, this is how, when I used to prepare my sessions, this is what we used to have to do. We used to have to effectively deconstruct everything that could happen in a match, isolate it, and put it in a way that could be repeated over and over again, so you could excel at it and master it, so it became second nature. That's effectively what a series of coaching sessions are. So you're absolutely right. It is just those, drills. And then what you do is you play the match at the end, the friendly match, the touch match, the no contact match, so no one gets injured before the big game. And you put it all together. You go through the phases of the things that we've learned today, and it's that, coaching, repetition, application, and then achievement ultimately.
But it's interesting that you talk about that, that you talk about the sandbox mode, because sooner or later, practically as we speak right now, this is going to happen from the coaches. Now that the coaches are in and that we're all on stage and feeling pretty important and stuff, we actually I'm a first year coach, so but the rest is starting to think, how can we do our practice methods better? So of course we talk to each other.
Sorry to interject in there. It's stuff like Earth mode. That was probably the best sandbox mode to practice combos because everything was on such a low cooldown that it was good.
Mm,
Like I don't know.
what's-
When you weren't around when Earth mode was around.
No. Like Earth mode is good for mechanical practice. Like if you want to just like practice solo mechanics from a single player, then Earth mode is pretty effective.
Isn't that like what we were discussing earlier, but like a sandbox
Exactly.
mode? Wouldn't that just be like the closest? I think Earth mode was like the closest thing to a no limits mode that we got in League of Legends. And when we were on complexity, we used Earth mode a lot for warm up, for just I remember we got up around like 11 a.m. Started queuing up Earth like at 1 p.m. and we did that for 2 hours as a warm up to scrims.
It's really good. It's like it's really effective, the Earth mode for like just mechanical practice. But how do you want to practice strategies with that? Like for
That's
actual
what scrims are for.
strategy. But
That's what scrims are for.
but scrims as they are played right now, and like you play a lot of them recently, so you know it. They're like, are they really that effective? Like, can you really practice everything you want to practice?
Scrims sound absolutely awful. I was going to ask you about this, Carl. So now is a good point.
Yeah, and
to do it, they sound really bad, like very inefficient. People are waiting around for long periods of time, and whenever anyone gets an advantage in a game, the other team just sort of pauses it and you restart again on the basis that.
Like that.
Well, not an advantage, but I mean an insurmountable advantage. I should say.
that those times are over because like we have a ground rule here that we don't cancel scrimmages just from an early lead. So we can get crushed the first 15 minutes. We're gonna play it out. Like sometimes it's hard, but every single game that we play, it's going to be played out. So up until the Nexus is at 10 HP and we have to actually post the game in order to not reveal the result. So every single game is going to be played out. And as far as I've seen it so far, not many teams actually cancel scrimmages like a long time before that. Like for that we have involved. Like I've heard the stories about like scrimmages being cancelled or like being ended like after 10 minutes last year as well, but that's not true.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I stand corrected.
That people are like hanging around for a lot of time in the lobby waiting for people. That's totally true. Like there's no denying in that. That's like a lot of wasted time. And also the scrimmages like you play a scrim. There's two ways of playing scrims. Either you play a scrim to win the game, like you just go for the composition and then you try to win, or you try to actually practice on the things you want to practice. And in order to do that, like let's say you wanna focus on dragon fights in this one practice session. How are you gonna do that without telling your opponent what you want to practice? It's not possible. So what we're working on right now is that we take like two random teams. One of them obviously Copenhagen Wolves, and we're gonna go into the scrimmage with the sole purpose to practice dragon fights. So we're gonna do 15 minutes of boring laning phase because there is no sandbox mode, without ganking, without trading, like just like simple going into the point where the first dragon fight usually happens, around 10 to 15 minutes, and then we're gonna start practice that dragon fight. Similar item builds, and then we're going to create situations with a vision set up, and we're going to go into that. And that's a way to play scrimmages without with giving them new purpose, I'd say. And with all the coaches coming in, and especially like with a person like Weldon helping me out when I want to like approach new things to the practice, it's going to be better. Like it's going to evolve by itself.
Well,
so let's sorry, go on, Rams.
Isn't that what like a bunch of Korean teams do with their sister teams?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's what we want to create. Like right now we don't have a sister team, and in the future, I don't know if there will be one like this split. Probably not. But as long as we don't have a sister team or like a team in Challenger series, there's no way for us to create those situations without approaching a different team in the LCS or in Challenger series. And ever since the coaches came in and everyone realizes, okay, we got to do something in order to make it more effective, that's going to evolve. I
think the biggest issue is finding a team of equal skill level to do it, because let's face it, like even though a team like Gambit might be at the bottom of the standing, if they were to make a sister team right now, the team would be complete garbage. And Gambit, like even though they're at the bottom of the standings, would not get good enough practice from a sister team that they can make. The talent pool.
So are you dissing yourself? Like honestly,
no.
like Like
No,
SK
I just
Prime,
said
for example.
if they were to pick up a challenger team of the players now that were left after this CS.
I gotta say as well, Ram. I don't always subscribe to this theory. I don't know. I definitely will get Weldon's opinion on this, but this is in my experience. This was a Counter-Strike thing. You know, I've never managed a League of Legends team, but I've talked to coaches and I've talked to players, and there seems to be this very interesting sort of dichotomy here. On the one hand, they don't want to practice against, you know, lower tier opposition. It's beneath them. They won't get good practice, as you put it. But on the other hand, when they do play them and they've got these random comps, random builds, do random things, you know, and they get caught out by it, they go, well, you know, that's bollocks. That's random. Well, yeah, you would have been prepared for it if you were practicing against those types of teams in the first place. You know, if you want a recent example of a team that just was totally underprepared for the opposition that they were playing, TSM versus Unicorns of Love. Unicorns of Love are struggling. Well, not struggling, but they're in the middle of the table in European LCS. They battered TSM. I'm sure TSM didn't prepare or give them any credence or any hope of winning that particular game. And this is what I mean. I think sometimes practicing against lower tier opposition, you can learn things, actually. And I think to not believe that is a very arrogant way of going about your business.
Looking at it.
Wait. You can learn things. But if we're talking about very specific styles of practice, like Carl was saying, what are you doing?
It's I don't know what he's doing.
Okay, it's like when you're talking about specific things, like each team is going to lane phase boringly for 15 minutes and then go fight a dragon. This team that we're talking about that's going to be pilled with the remaining players in the EU Challenger pool, which is not that much, are obviously going to be weaker players overall and weaker team fighters for that specific thing. So the actual practice...
Is that a wolf eating SK Gaming?
Yeah, it was a wolf eating the SK Gaming logo. I know we are.
Oh, that is mental warfare right there.
Yeah, we are going to talk about that game in a moment. Sorry, Ram, do continue.
Swiper, no swiping. Anyway, when we're talking about this specific practice, then it won't work. But if you're talking about just general training, I'll give you an example that we've encountered in scrims. A team called HWA, they're a Turkish team. What we really like about scrimming them is that they play uniquely, and they give us sometimes a challenge in the games when they team fight, because they team fight incredibly well and in a different way than other teams of that caliber. So when we actually scrimmed them and we saw the way they played, it was actually really refreshing. So yeah, these teams kind of come out of nowhere. But if we're talking about specific practice to groom one team to do one thing better, you kind of want the other team to be at the same skill level of the teams that you'll be playing with. So let's say CW versus SK, for example. 15 minutes of bland laning phase, and then you go to a dragon team fight and you fight. It's going to be completely different than a scrim against a lower skilled team and team fighting against them, because they won't have the coordination. They won't have anywhere near the level of mechanical skill or coordination that SK have, for example. Which is why the practice, in my opinion, of building a sister team right now for EU is almost out of the question. It worked in Korea because they were able to have two teams, or they used to be able to have two teams in the same league, so that they were approximately at the same level. Though the only one that we really saw were at similar level was Blue and White, who constantly bashed-headed each other, and then it was apparent that White was just superior to Blue at World Finals.
Well, SKT.
SKT, okay, SKTS and SKTK. I don't think that was close at all.
I think the practice they had was pretty effective, I'd say. Although the performances like in the Rift weren't that like similar, but I'd say that was a successful model. And a lot of them are. And it's just a matter of how many resources do you want to put into such a sister team. Like there's a difference in like hiring a sister team who plays like Challenger series and then playing online against them, or if you actually pay them a salary, get them into the gaming house and create that Korean environment. Like if you do that, you could build a sister team right now. And it would be effective, for that I'm pretty sure.
I mean, I see kind of both sides of the argument again, and I like what you're saying. I think having sister teams can be useful, but the problem you've got is, and this is one of the reasons why I've always rallied against having sister teams, is that if those people then compete in the same league, and you have the same financial and controlling interests behind them, then you've got a question mark about competitive integrity coming up, which could be, for example, and this, I'm sure this has never happened ever in the history of League of Legends, but let's just say you had one team that was owned by one organization and they had to play another team that was owned by the same organization. They were already out of the tournament. If they win, they go through to the next round or maybe even the final or something like that, and they take a dive. They don't try as hard, because why would you win for your own personal pride and fuck over the other team?
But a prime example for that was the Samsung organization in the Season 4 World Finals. Like, they could have easily...
You said it. You said it. Not me.
Like, easily, they could have created a scenario where they meet each other in the final. And for the organization itself, it would have been, okay, you get the first prize money, we get the second prize money, so it's easy. And the way to the final was pretty easy for both teams. Yeah. Like, with just a bit of interference and like losing that one game to drop on second place, it would have been easily possible.
I think had we not had the AHQ stuff, I think we probably would have seen that, frankly.
Yeah.
There's so much money invested, as Weldon was talking about earlier in this. Everybody makes decisions based on money. I know when I was investigating the relationship between Lemon Dogs and NIP, that one of their sponsors, who again I won't name, had intimated to both teams, don't. When they had the option to select people in the relegation playoffs, it was like, try not to pick teams that have the same sponsor, because we'd like as many teams that are sponsored by this,
I'm not surprised that that's happening.
Organization to get through and be an LCS. Now, they laughed that off. I'm going, but we were just joking. Yeah, but that conversation took place, though. So this is what I mean. I think when we get into the realms of sister teams, that's, that for me is hugely problematic in an industry this small. It's not like, for example, in something established like NFL or NBA, Nike would say to two Nike teams, well, they've got a chance of, winning the whole, they've got a chance of winning the Super Bowl, so you got to lose to them because you haven't. That would never happen because it's too big. It's just about, bums on seats, so to speak, and money in the bank. But even with that as an example, we can talk about, there was rumors about Ronaldo and having sponsor interference back in the Brazil team when he had a very strange seizure from nowhere, and was he going to play and wasn't he, when they lost to France. So sponsor interference is a big enough problem. I think if you get into the realms of sister teams and they're controlled by the same management system and infrastructure and they have the same financial masters, this can't work in an industry like ours.
Yeah, there are two sides. There's one side where it comes to the sponsorship interference that you can get, and there's this one side that you want to create a better practice environment for your team,
but there's
which
a way
is
to solve that
completely
problem.
unrelated. So beat it.
Okay, no. If they are unrelated, though, that team that you're practicing with would have to operate completely entirely in a way where you never played them in a competitive setting.
How's that possible? Yeah, it is possible by the Riot rule set. Like, you're not even allowed to have two teams in the LCS.
I get that. But what I'm saying is, if we're talking about the Korean way,
that doesn't work.
It wouldn't work. Now, we've got interesting setups like what we've seen with the H2K guys and the SK guys, and they're sharing an office space, and they're coming together quite regularly for structured practices. Roccat as well, of course, our friends at Roccat. They're all playing with each other in a very controlled and structured environment, almost as if it was a training house, a boot camp, if you like, all to itself. Do you think we'll see more situations like that come about?
Absolutely. It's not necessarily just what you said, but it's on top of the fact that separating the home environment from the office environment is what a lot of people believe the way to be an efficient way of practice. It'll get the players' mindsets in order and help them. I think it's actually a more psychological thing. I think Weldon can agree with me on that, where some players might have a big problem practicing and playing and working in the same house that they live in and sleep in. It can take its toll on people. But not just that, it's also the fact that now SK, Roccat, and H2K can be scrim partners. Obviously, when they're not playing each other on the weekend, they can be scrim partners for the week or for multiple weeks and train with each other, which is a good thing. But I still don't think that EU is to the point where we can start actively using sister teams to help main teams. Because if we take a look at it, I was on SKP last season when we were the team with What the Fox and Smitty J, and not a single time did we ever scrim the main SK lineup. Fnatic picked up an academy team that didn't even make it into the CS, and I'm almost certain that none of them are ever going to actually scrim the main Fnatic roster. Even though Fnatic did say that they were going to use this team as a training partner for the main team. It just doesn't work that way in EU. And I think we just, especially now that it has come to 10 teams in the LCS, if teams actually end up picking a sister team, not only do they... I don't think teams in EU here, I'm just going to try to formulate my thoughts so I don't sound like a complete idiot or more than I am. I don't think that teams in EU are ready to really put the investment and supplies into a sister team to try to get them to a level where using that sister team to benefit the main team is like... They're never gonna want to put the resources into that to get it to happen. Because like compared to what the main LCS teams are getting from Riot, which is like the salary, the housing money, which organizations are using for coaching, a lot of the times these orgs aren't prepared to do that same thing for their sister team because Riot's not taking care of them. The org is. In the challenger scene, you get a certain amount of money, but it's nowhere near what Riot are actually giving LCS teams.
Right, so let's just focus a bit more on what Carl is doing for a day job. Copenhagen Wolves. And I'm amazed because you actually seem to know what you're doing, Carl. Because usually Copenhagen Wolves are right down in the doldrums, battling for LCS status. And they're nicely poised at the moment. I think, joint fourth, I think it is. Is that right?
We're 3-3. Yeah. Fourth place.
So,
but together with some other teams.
Yeah, so come on, man. You can toot your horn here. What have you been doing? Why are things different for Copenhagen Wolves this time around? Because let's not forget, this team was nearly released in the off-season.
Yeah, totally. And the reasons why they weren't released was kind of beyond my belief. But obviously, I can't tell what the differences are from this year's team to last year's team. Besides the replacements of Woolite for Freeze, which a lot of people thought that it's well, you can educate me on that. I would be amazed to hear that afterwards. But first of all, the only real change on paper is that we replaced Woolite with Freeze, and a lot of people came into the season and said it's a downgrade. I think that Alice has proven that it's not a downgrade. It's a similar thing. He is an LCS AD carry who can stand his ground, and he can do it awesomely well. So that's the only difference on paper. Not a huge one, and not a changing one. Why we actually perform pretty damn good, sort of, is that we haven't faced the really good teams yet. Let's be honest. No. It's no
pretty
disrespect.
Candid.
It's not a disrespect to the teams
No,
because every single one is great. But if you look at the LCS as of right now, who do you got? You got SK, you got Rocket, you got Fnatic at the top, and the only team that's with them and that we played against is Elements. So yeah, we got those 4 teams who are undoubtedly at the top of the LCS, and 3 of them we haven't played yet. So coming into this week, although the Wolf 8 SK, expecting a win in that game, it's kind of unrealistic. We always practice to beat them. We don't go into an LCS match with the feeling that we will lose. We'll give our best to win, and each and every single player will do that. But on paper, we're the weaker team, and on paper, we haven't played 3 of the 4 teams who are undoubtedly better. The upset against Unicorns of Love was nice, but beating SK is a whole different caliber, I'd say.
I'll bring Weldon in as well because you've been helping Carl out. Now, I don't know the extent of the relationship. I'm sure it's
pretty close.
I was thinking it's purely platonic. But what have you been doing to help Carl out? And have you worked directly with any of the Copenhagen Wolves players or anything like that?
Yeah, so like I said before, basically I do one-on-one work and group work. And the group workshops are things that I can handle in the group setting, like training effectiveness and stuff like that. And then I work with Carl on like how to communicate with players in order to how to give feedback to a player, because a lot of coaches, here's a tip for all you coaches out there. You can take this to the bank. A lot of coaches think it's their job to like point out what a player did wrong. Like they're like, okay, I'm an authority on tactics or analysis, or I'm a mirror for them. So I'm going to show them, I'm going to tell them what they did wrong because they can't see that. But that's not what a coach is. Like the coach's job is to help the player as rapidly as possible learn a new motor skill. If you just take it all out to the abstract, okay, you got these neurons wired in your brain. You want to, as effectively and quickly as possible, rewrite those to a new pattern. Okay. And just telling somebody like, oh, you did that wrong. I mean, how many times has that helped you learn something new? If you think about your own experience, somebody comes up to you and just says, you screwed that up. You're like, yeah, thanks a lot. So there's 3 different ways you can communicate. It depends on the player's personality, but let's say you got a player that's like kind of beaten down and they know what they did wrong. The first thing you want to do is empathize with them. So you would say something like, wow, it looked like you were having a crushing time in lane there. Like, what was your perspective? And elicit, like, try to show that you can like read exactly what they're kind of like sensing. And then you want to empower them. So you give them the ability to critique themselves. Okay. And that is where actual learning happens, is through self-reflection. When you say like, oh yeah, I did this wrong. So you would give them space essentially to correct themselves. You'd say, so where do you think the turning point happened in the lane? Like, where was the moment that you like lost control of, like, what was the bad trade or whatever? Like, help me out. And you talk them through it, because this is what most people need, is they need to build up their own kind of self-worth again after a loss, so that they can critique themselves, because that is how you start this process of behavioral change. And then the third thing you do is you give them autonomy. You say, okay, I have some ideas about how we could fix this, or like my analyst has an idea, but like, what do you think? What do you want to, do you have anything you want to throw out there? Or do you want to hear what we have to say? And then you make them ask for it, because then they're in the driver's seat. And this is far more effective. It's been proven through research to be way more effective than just telling somebody to do something differently or telling them what they did wrong. And so we talk about things like that. And then with the players, I'm working, I started with the basics, which is like goal setting and how to have an effective day of training, like putting yourself in the right mindset from the morning onward. And right now we're getting to the communication phase. So this is actually something unique to esport, because in traditional sport, mainstream sport, it's the coaches that have come up through the profession and are at the highest level. I mean, we don't have sports psychologists below the Olympic level in traditional sport. It's always at the top level. Yeah. And at the top level, the coaches are the ones that take care of team communication and player interpersonal relationships, because that's like they're protecting it. That's their forte. And they're trained in that. They have experience in that. And they have a system, of the way that they do it. So sports psychologists are not allowed to tread on that usually. But in esport, we don't have these, career coaches that have been coaching for 15 years and they have their own system. So I get to do a lot more work with how players communicate with each other, how to give feedback to a peer, so that I don't know if you saw Crumb's vlog the other day when he was talking about how to be a pro.
Yeah, what it takes to be a pro gamer, right?
And he said, like, when you critique a person, you critique the position. You say mid needs to be more aggressive there, not you need to be more aggressive there. So it's things like that, like how you phrase feedback and how you listen to feedback, that kind of smooth out.
It depends a lot on the maturity of the player, of who you're talking to, because there are like so many situations when you're giving criticism to someone, or not necessarily criticism, but analyzing faults in gameplay, that they take the analyzation or the coaching that you're doing too personally. And I've experienced that as both teammates and teams that I've coached, players who don't differentiate their personal like being to the person that they are in the game. Their position, their job in the team, when they hear the criticism, they personalize it and they take it to heart, and they never really learn anything, because then they start feeling like, oh, he's just criticizing me because he doesn't like me, or I can't believe he'd say something about that
And
about me.
that is the problem. You've correctly identified it. But the assumption, I think, is that we should somehow be able to be mentally tough enough to just take criticism. And the reality is that humans are just not good at that.
But the problem is
and
that
that's okay, because there are other ways to improve somebody without criticizing them directly and triggering those mechanisms in the brain that go defensive.
yeah, it's just that you have to also realize that the people that you're going to be working with are going to be between the ages of like 17 and 22 on average, and even older than that maybe, and they might not have had the life skills to have the right mindset when it comes to receiving criticism. All my life, I've been criticized by my parents in good and bad ways, and by people around me. So it's like it was very easy for me to transition. But I know a lot of people who've never been in situations like that before. Who this is like the first time where they're having an authoritative figure watch them and give them not necessarily just advice, but guide them, and then they just take it the wrong way, and then the practice or the main point of it just gets lost in the gigantic arguments or just feelings getting hurt. The maturity level is really low on average amongst a lot of people in esports, and you need to what's the word? It needs to be something that a lot of coaches need to keep in mind when they're working, and not only coaches, like psychologists, sword psychologists like you, that the players that you're working with are kids. Like even if by age they might not be, but they really are kids, and they don't have the experience to deal with the criticism like that.
So in that point, I got really lucky because I don't think I have any kids in my team.
No,
to be honest, from the maturity level.
I think that a lot of the players that I was playing with in the past on Copenhagen Wolves, Joey Unlimited,
Soren.
and Soren as well. Yeah, I forgot his name for a sec. They're mature and they took the criticism well. But other players that I'm not honestly not gonna name now, that I've worked with in the past, took the criticism very poorly and lashed out at others.
Yeah, but it's also it depends always on, like, you asked me what my day-to-day work is, like what I'm doing, like what the usual coach day is, and it's a lot different from what a lot of people like expect, to be honest, because it's like so much more about dealing with crocodiles who come over the shoulder, and it's also about like guiding them, like giving them. We talked about what does a player need in order to perform, like what level of security does he need, like what level of what he has to have, like what he has to worry about all the time, and like just making sure that they don't have to worry about that is a huge part of what a coach has to do if you don't have a manager with you living in the house. And we unfortunately or fortunately for me don't have that, so I have to take care of that as well, when it comes to everyday problems. And then it comes to like building a relationship with the players, because let's not forget, like, I'm living with them. Like it's not just that I come to the office, like, or to the like sports field at 9 a.m, do my practice up until 7, and then go home to my family. That's not the case. I'm living with them like every day, 24 hours, and that's the same for like, I guess, every LCS coach. I must be really wrong if someone is not doing that, but
it's quite unique in that sense. So I've had this conversation with Odie actually on air, where he was like, you wouldn't get another sport where the coach sort of lives with the players, like
but for me it's awesome, because like
I think it's another
exactly,
it's another area. Esports is very unique and special.
Yeah, it's esports. Like it's so much more than just like actually watching the scrimmages and telling them what they do wrong and what they could do better, and how we're gonna do the picks and bans against SK, and what I'm gonna write in my empty book. It's a lot more than that. Like the behind the scene work is a lot more.
So here's one final Copenhagen Wolves question, and then we'll round up EULCS, and then we'll call it a night.
No, I have some questions after that. I've got like one or two.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, I want to ask you about Youngbuck.
Oh, there we go.
We're talking about criticism. Now, I know Joey. I've always said I think he's actually a model captain in a lot of ways. I admire him. I think he's got very broad shoulders, figuratively, not literally, in the sense that he, probably gets more, pressure put on him than any other player in the team. The fans are very vocal about him being it varies, to, not good enough or not good in this current meta or washed up or whatever it is, whatever they say. You read this quite often. And I think that's certainly a harsh assessment of an experienced pro and what he brings to the table. And when I've interviewed, Jacob, the co-founder of Copenhagen Wolves, he says Joey is, for him, the heart of the team. He's not worked with many better professional minds in esports. Now we're starting to get all the criticism levied at him again because it's that time of the season. What are your thoughts about how Joey's coping and whether that's getting to him or whether there's even any truth in some of the criticism that's being leveled at him?
Well, first of all, like you're totally correct that he is one of the like role model team captains that you can have in a team. And before I came into the team, he did a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now. Like he managed way too many things for the fact that he's a professional player. So right now, I'd say he's definitely on the way to getting out of this hole, and to understand what he's dealing with. I'm going to bring up a good friend of mine, and it's in fact Wonder Game, and I talked about him after the win against Unicorns of Love, where he wrote something and asked, "Oh, I got credit for saying something positive about Copenhagen Wolves on Reddit." And I said, "Oh, you were going for the cheap karma." And then he replied, "No, if I go for the cheap karma, I just write young suck." And that kind of sums it up. Like that obviously sums it up. Like that's the way how Reddit and how the League of Legends community works. Whenever there's something going wrong, people criticize Youngbuck. And for me, as a coach who knows him, who's like a good friend of him, that's like 100% unfair. Like he had his interview after the game where he said like that he has one of the best teleport usages in the US. Judging from what I as a coach can see, that is totally true. Like I would agree on that. Not being like subjective, but like just from my objective view from scrimmages and what I know he's capable of, I would agree on that. And in that game, he had like an unfortunate teleport. So what is Reddit going to focus on that single teleport? Yeah, it's unfortunate and it's unfair, but I think Joey can deal with it. And we're finding ways to help him deal with that. Like especially Weldon and myself.
It can be useful to have a lightning rod, in the team, someone that's strong enough to take the criticism, and takes all of the criticism, directed at him, and it deflects from any criticism being aimed at any other players. Weldon, just quickly, have you worked with Joey? What are your thoughts about him?
Yeah. So one of the fun things about my job is that because of the training and the practical training I've had, I can kind of like get inside the mind of players when I watch a game. So one of the things I do for all the teams I work with is game analysis, where I'll watch the game without any comms or anything, and I'll tell them like what they're thinking and feeling at specific moments and how that relates to their performance in the next few seconds. And I always get hilarious comments like, "How in the world did you read my mind?" So you have something with that psychic connection there. But I think it's really nice for somebody like Joey because, he gets, just because of the team that he's on and the position that he's in, he gets a lot of criticism for all of his plays, and he doesn't get a lot of recognition for the plays that he does make. And I can see in the games when he's being mentally tough, when he's exhibiting mental toughness and executing an elite movement, which we define elite movements as automated skills that you perform quickly because you've trained them, and it ends up being the correct one. So I point those out because what we're trying to do is capture that mindset always when I work with an elite player, and we're trying to transport it to all the other periods of the game so that they can be like always in the zone, essentially. And it's very edifying to feel like, okay, you're in the zone half the time, and so the times you're out of the zone are not the whole entirety of your identity, but they're just the times that you can work on.
Yeah,
and that's my perspective of working with him.
And also,
that, he's really motivated, and that's all I need to make a professional.
A funny thing is that when you read the Reddit comments and people ask about why is he still on the team, people bring up the reasons he's very close to the management. He's the shot caller. And yeah, that's about it. And I wouldn't agree with neither of them. Like, but he still is, and he will play this week, and he will play the rest of the split, and we will perform as we are, the 5 people sitting here.
So, Ram, unless you've got any other questions, we'll jump on a bit of an EU LCS roundup. Is that all right?
He's not really making a very big good case for himself when in the first 2 games he went 0-4 in the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
but that's gonna happen. Like you've been, like if you played solo queue in like I don't want to compare solo queue to LCS play. Don't get me wrong. Please don't get me wrong. Oh yeah, I'm disqualified as a coach. But if you've ever been camped, then you know that it can like quickly evolve into this huge mess. And especially when you're Joey, who goes into LCS with a mindset to prove Reddit wrong, like to make them realize that he is indeed a worthy LCS player, which he 100% is. And that gets to his mind. And then he plays over-aggressive in situations where he shouldn't be. And if you like watch the games in week 2, and especially in week 3, you see that we worked on that and that he's gotten better at it. And this week he will be even better. I'm 100% sure about that.
It's something that's happened to Dyrus as well, throughout his career. People feel, if you camp Dyrus, that's one of the ways you can, shut down TSM and apply pressure, because he is a player who, again, sets himself a very high standard.
It's the weak, it's like not the weakest link principle, but it's like when you're an analyst or a coach and you go into a game against Copenhagen Wolves, you're going to watch footage from the past, and you're obviously going to see that once you gank top lane, there is a good chance that it will succeed over and over again. So you're going to go for the cheap trick. And yeah, dealing with that is actually pretty hard. I don't know how many pros ever been in this situation, but he is. And he's working on it, and he's dealing with it pretty damn great. Like, I couldn't expect more. So...
So what we'll do is we'll take the results kind of and the standings all as one. Let's talk a little bit about SK Gaming. Now, we've always been a big proponent of SK Gaming on this show. I certainly said, I can't remember if Ram agreed with me, and obviously Josh, he certainly didn't agree because it would have involved praising EU as a region. So he certainly wouldn't have said that.
He was asleep when we were talking about it. So.
Yeah, that too. But we said Forgiven was going to be a massive improvement for SK Gaming and was going to propel them into the upper echelons of the league. I wasn't expecting them to go 6-0, I must confess, but they've done incredibly well. They certainly look like the best team.
Yeah, but it's not only Forgiven. It's not only Forgiven.
No, of course not.
I mean,
but he's a massive part of it.
The beauty of SK is how are you going to shut that team down?
Exactly.
Like, you can't. You got Sven Skarin. Got Sven Skarin. He's like one of the, if not the strongest early game junglers who transmits like pretty damn well into mid game, and that's also pretty effective in the late game. Then you got Freddy, and whoever watched Freddy on Azir last week knows what that guy is capable of. Like, he carried that team fight 1v9 and got the victory home. And then you got like N-rated and Forgiven, which is like N-rated is like, I've talked to him and he's German, so he could like, we're getting along pretty well. He's one of the most intelligent persons out there when it comes to League of Legends. And with Forgiven, who's like one of the best AD carries out there, and I'd go as far to say like if he stands that level and if he even gets better, he will be in the position to say that he's a top 5 AD carry in the world once we hit the grand stage at the end of the season. And you compare that with Fox, like a pretty damn talented mid lane talent, and you got a team. How are you going to beat them? I don't know.
Well, so that's the question, Carl, because you've got to beat them. You're playing them.
Yeah, my tactic is we just tilt them.
So, see, don't they have a sports psychologist? So that's not going to work.
Just tilt them. Okay.
Just tilt them.
Well, I think that's going to be a somewhat tall order, but they had a fairly easy week. Well, they had one easy game, I would say. No disrespect to our friends at H2K, but it was always going to be a tall order for a newly promoted team to beat someone as established as SK, especially on the run of form they are. What surprised me was, I watched the game against Elements. I thought, again, they showed a real cutting edge in that game. A lot of people were talking about Elements or, being probably the stronger team in EU. And SK Gaming, I thought, really showed that, they are the real deal. They are going to perform well against big teams. So, I mean, do we think SK Gaming can continue this over the course of the season?
Yeah, for sure. But I think
for sure.
what's a problem with SK, it's not really even a big problem, is that a lot of the hype per se or the attention has been brought onto Forgiven when it really is a gigantic team effort. It was actually really nice to see the Reddit thread that was talking about Fox, because Fox was, in my opinion, like we all agreed that Forgiven was going to be a better pick than Candy Panda when it comes to the 80 role, but no one has really been talking about Fox, and Fox has been performing very well across all the SK games, though he hasn't really been receiving much of the praise because it's all going to the by far unkillable Forgiven, which I think is unfair, because the way that team performs, the way that team works, is that they do it as a unit. And Forgiven, in my opinion, he's just another piece of a really well-oiled machine that is SK Gaming. And people aren't giving enough credit to the other pieces, like what Carl was saying about Svenskeren, who in my opinion is the best jungler in EU, definitely making a huge point of being the best jungler in the West. And Rated, while mechanically might not be the best player, we know that he brings a different level of understanding of game knowledge and shot calling to a team. And then Freddy, unmovable rock top lane, can play everything, and then Fox in the mid lane. It's not one person that's going to be the main carry of SK, which means you can't really shut him down. So I definitely see the next few weeks being an SK dominated group, or an SK dominated future.
So we'll jump on to the next major talking point that happened across Thursday and Friday. It was a bit of a surprise for me. We've talked about Fnatic, how they had a clusterfuck off season. They were scrambling to get a roster together, and it turned out when they finally did get a roster together, it was actually good, which it blows my mind. I mean, again, I can't believe for a second it was all by design, but I'm certainly happy for them. But they did lose to Unicorns of Love this week, which was a bit of a shock. They did, of course, beat Giants. That game was a bit meh. That wasn't very exciting to watch. But the Unicorns of Love game certainly was, and Fnatic actually seemed to be a little bit found out tactically. What Unicorns of Love did really well was they seemed to be able to read when Rainover was going to go in for those ganks, and was, they sort of read the aggression in it almost in advance of it. Did you guys watch this game? And again, open floor. You can join in as well, Weldon, by all means, if you want.
UoL versus Fnatic?
Yeah, so how were they able to overcome a team that had looked so strong?
Go for it, Carl, Weldon.
Well, Unicorns of Love is just a pretty damn good team. Like, despite the fact that we beat them, I didn't expect that we would win against them, is just a pretty good team with a really good coach and a whole staff behind them, and they were able to read Fnatic. Fnatic played the same style for about every match I've seen so far. So sure. There are some weaknesses. There are some weaknesses in the certainly when you first time encounter it, flawless teleport play of Huni, and the rotations that he does, and this all-in pressuring of objectives. That's when the first time you counter it, you're gonna get stomped by that. But if you do it over and over again, smart people will find a way to work against it, and that's what Unicorns of Love did. They had the perfect picks for that. They had the perfect strategy going into that game, and they succeeded. So it wasn't a surprise for me, to be honest.
One thing I like about Unicorns of Love most of all is that they play a lot similar to what we saw from Chinese teams in Season 3 and Season 4, is when they committed to something, they all commit completely as a unit, which is why Unicorns of Love get a really explosive team fights. And it really feels like they're almost on the same page, though the games that they lose are the ones that they kind of mess up the early game, and when they all commit to team fights, they all kind of get shot in the foot because they shouldn't be team fighting with those comps. But if you look at the way that they pick and the way that they play, like for example, I'm just thinking about Kikis's flank with a Rek'Sai, where they all flash in, no solar flare, knock up, Gnar ult, like they always go all in to team fights as a unit, and they all seem very coordinated when it comes to that, which is I think what caught Fnatic off guard and how they managed to pick up a win there. And it's also why they'll continue to pick up wins, because this is a type of thing that even the best teams sometimes have issues with.
But you can't forget that Fnatic has Bora Yellowstar on his team. So the team playing against them this week, thinking about that they won't change their game plan and that they won't come up with something new. And by fact, the coach of Fnatic is one of the smartest guys I've ever talked to, like a poker professional, like a former poker coach, and a really smart person overall. Like he's going to come up with some stuff that we haven't seen so far. So underestimating them now that we found the way to beat them, or Unicorns of Love found the way to beat them, that's like really wrong. They will finish top 3. They are definitely one of the best teams.
Fnatic are really
Europe.
good. They have, I think, a lot of people gave Yellowstar the credit of being an amazing shot caller, and they managed, I guess Unicorns of Love managed to exploit a gameplay fault of Fnatic that will obviously be covered up.
Well, Weldon, I want to bring you in, because if we're talking about predictability in Fnatic's play, and as Carl points out, they managed to isolate one player tactically to gain an advantage, does that not mean they could come unstuck over a long season?
It has to do with the flexibility of everybody's play styles. So, like, depending on the composition you pick and the type of character you pick, you're going to have a certain play style going into a game. And if you're playing Gnar and you're thinking of that you're playing like, and if you're an Aurelia player at heart, then you might not be able to execute in the team composition the way that you want to instinctually. So the best players can, like Dyrus, can flex their play style between like carry role, tank role, peeling role, like without making a mistake in a high pressure situation. And what I see with Unicorns of Love is that, and also Fnatic actually, both of them, is that they have a very rigid set of instinctual reactions. So they have the certain play style. Their characters are very dominant, and I think that both teams are working on making it so that their players can like go into a match and choose. Okay, I'm gonna play this game, and I'm not gonna screw up and go offensive. I'm gonna peel for my carry because that is the team comp I have.
Okay, well, look, I'm going to cut you off there because, I'm doing it for you. It's tough love because we've got something that we absolutely have to talk about right at the end, and it involves you. But we do want to just quickly get this EULCS roundup done as well. It's so let's talk about Gambit quickly. 1-5. Their only win coming over H2K. I'm a little bit surprised to see Gambit Gaming struggling so much. After winning IEM, I thought that would certainly buoy them, give them some confidence. It proved that they were capable of, good things. But they haven't really been able to piece that together within the context of an LCS season. Again, because we're pushed for time, just some quick thoughts about what the problems with Gambit Gaming are right now. Open forum.
Well, I actually it's actually Carlo I want to ask. I want to ask your opinion on their coach, or what you know about Leviathan, because I know a lot of people that I've spoken to have been criticizing him for the pick spans of the teams that were previously very good, and the lack of cohesion in their gameplay.
I don't think that he's the problem. Like, I've talked to him, and I've talked to him for a long time in the last couple of weeks, and I wouldn't say that he's the sole reason, or that he is a reason for Gambit underperforming in LCS. By fact, the game we won against them, we didn't win that game. They lost it, plain and simple. And as far as I could see, Leviathan was not on that server. So he didn't make the decision to not push through when 2 inhibitors were down. So I'd say the coach is a reason why a lot of teams could be struggling, but in this case I wouldn't say it's fair. It's a fair assumption, because then again, last year, who was he coaching? Alliance. They did win the LCS split and went to Worlds.
Fair comment.
Gambit Gaming will get their shit together, and they won't be relegated this split.
Well, while we're talking about relegation, we'll move swiftly on to, I mean, I got to say now, Meet Your Makers, who we talked about at the top of the show, 1-5 as well. I don't really see any way back for them. I mean, they announced today that they're going to be in talks with Selfie. There's a lot of chatter, in kind of around the water cooler that Selfie might finally be leaving the team after all, and has certainly been linked with several organizations. And of course, they're still awaiting Riot's decision. Now, all of this must cast a cloud of uncertainty over the team, and they've lost a manager as well, and quite possibly more ramifications to come. This will impact on the players. Do we think Meet Your Makers can turn this around and somehow avoid being rock bottom come the end of this split?
The split?
I think it depends on leadership within the team. Like if there's somebody within the group or the coach that can really pull everybody together around a movement or a moment of leadership, then you can actually go into situations like this and come out stronger on the other end, because your mindset is the underdog. Like nobody's expecting us to perform now, and we have all we have to do is show up and try our best, and like nobody's going to criticize us, if we fail. If they get that moment of leadership, then I think that they could actually take it pretty far and rebound. But it kind of depends on if they can pull the team together cohesively or not. My read.
I guess we'll have a better opportunity to answer that question when we do indeed find out what Riot have decided. It might be it's a somewhat moot topic of discussion if Riot decide to go DEFCON 1. And then just finally, just to talk about our friends Roccat regulars on the show. 3-3. Bit of a mixed bag for them so far. Yeah, well, they had a very good week this week, but they were playing Giants and Meet Your Makers.
Yeah, and they were playing weaker teams, but I feel like the issues that they had before were starting to get fixed, and it looks like they're on an upward spiral. And also, they also remember they were also playing their stronger teams in the first week, so they might be better prepared for these teams come in the next circulation. They play each. Go for it.
Rocket, one of the best teams in the ULCS, definitely a candidate for going to top 3. Like as I said, Rocket, Fnatic, SK, Elements, those 4 teams will make it.
I was talking to Fly before the split and about the decisions in the structure he was putting around the team, and I think that they did everything right. I think that the way that they've structured their team and the training environment and their approach to scrims is like cutting edge for esport training. I think it's much better than a lot of other teams have set themselves up. And I think the only thing that they did wrong was they didn't hire me. But let's be honest, it's much better to take a team from last place all the way to Worlds than to take Roccat, all the way to Worlds. So I predicted them as number 1 before the season even started, and I think I'm going to see them up at the top of the bracket.
I certainly hope so, dude. I think they're a great team. We love their players. We think they're super professional. They come on this show all the time and bring so much to what we do here. But it's got to be said, they've certainly surprised me with how underwhelming they've been so far this season. So I hope they do get it together, because they're certainly a much better team than they've looked so far.
Well, you have this mindset. They come in and they see themselves in this very professional environment, and they think like, oh gosh, I mean, this is going to result in us being superstars. We just got to show up and we're going to auto win. And that leads to actually a very unhealthy mindset in the game. So you have to lose a couple times to erase that. You can look, for example, at CLG when they went and they boot camped in Korea, and they came back thinking like, okay, we've really got this. They were focusing on the future.
Yeah, the hyperbolic chamber.
On the present moment. So I think that their losses are going to make them focus on the now, like how are we going to win this week, and not where are we going 4 weeks from now, in the season or in the split finals, which actually is not 4 weeks from now, but yeah. So I think it's only helpful for them. I mean, trials breed excellence. So
I like it. A good little soundbite there to end our EULCS roundup on. And indeed, we're gonna come to you in a moment, Weldon. But this just in: breaking news on First Blood, as there often is. It is the window into the shit that just gets passed across my desk, and I have to pick through it all and find out what is news. I've just been reliably informed by a couple of sources today. No reason to doubt it. That they would certainly know this kind of thing. That the word on the street is Cloud9 Tempest are going to be banned from competing in NACS because the support player didn't patch their client and they used an illegal substitute. This is again just breaking news.
Woo!
Yeah, woo, indeed.
Woo!
So that's certainly put a cat among the pigeons. More on that as it happens. I'm going to get into that now as soon as this show ends, and we'll see where that goes. But shocking revelations there. I mean, I again. When I say something, Riot will go the opposite way. They'll be holding a meeting right now saying, well, Richard's called it, so we got to do the opposite, because then that discredits him, and when he writes nasty things about us, no one will believe it. So they probably won't get banned now, but actually, yeah, as things stand, they are. So there you go. That's the news. Right, Weldon, to wrap us up, because we believe in you so much and we love you so much, and it's great. Well, no, we'll definitely get you on for another show. I think. Because yeah, who knows? Perhaps,
without my buddy, I don't know if I can not have my wingman.
Well, we can do that too. But you did set up a kind of offer for ThinkPiece readers that I wanted to quickly talk about before we ended the show. ThinkPiece.gg is the website that I curate. It's an open publishing platform for people to publish editorial and opinion pieces about esports, because other publications are too weak to kind of support it if they go against the status quo. We've published an article by you, which is essentially, even though you do work with professionals, it's about solo queue and how you can improve as an individual in that context. But off the back of that, I know you've been so kind as to give basically an offer for people who read the website. So I just wanted you to tell us a little bit about that before we wrapped up.
Yeah, so my brand is called Mind Games, and Mind Games Consulting. And essentially, just so that everybody is clear, like I have a business-to-business relationship with Copenhagen Wolves, so I don't coach any other teams in the EULCS, but I'm not like a member of their staff or anything. So I have my own company, and that company, one of my missions is to help aspiring professional athletes make the transition to a professional esport athlete. And I think that this is a very tough transition, because a lot of people think you have to go and get that LAN experience. You have to get the pressure situations. That's where you train that. But that's kind of an urban myth, because actually you can train those skills in your home environment, on the ladder consistently, and put yourself in a very mentally tough situation prior to making the leap to the big stage. As well as, like we have all these situations with, Meet Your Makers, where we have problems that I think that somebody who's more intentional about their path from amateur to professional would not be facing. So starting next month, I think March 2nd, I'm beginning a training program, most of which, all the free stuff that I'm doing is going to be much better than anything you could ever pay for. And the only reason I'm going to have to gate it with payment is because I don't have infinite hours in my life, so I can't coach every player in the world. But I'm going to be doing a ton of training through email and video and open Q&As and things like that for aspiring professionals. And in the future, I'll be hitting people who just want to play solo queue and maybe parents of esport athletes. But right now, my focus is on those of you who really want to kind of like make the transition, or those of you who are in the field already and want to get access to this kind of training. And so if you go to mindgames.gg, which is my website, /First Blood, then you'll find the countdown to when that email is going to get sent out, and you'll get access to the training in the portal there. And so you can go there and you can just register. Send your email to me, get on the email list, and I'll send out all the information on March 2nd when we launch.
Awesome. Well,
and if you go through mindgames.gg/firstblood or /thinkpiece, as you'll see in the article that I have up on ThinkPiece, then you'll go to a specific page, and so I'll know that you came from here. And when all the free training launches, then there'll also be, of course, this the private forum, and I'll send a deal for you guys that came through this.
Nice.
Show.
So there you go, guys. People who watch First Blood, I mean, we know you guys don't need the training really because you're all Challenger. But
Challenger 1.
yeah. But for the few of you that aren't,
shopping out your options for which CLG or TSM, whatever one.
Exactly. I mean, and indeed for those who are, you're absolutely right. Where you want to end up? Do you want to be the next Link or the next Reginald? You decide.
I'd rather be Reginald. That guy's making millions, dude.
I heard that from a chap called Sky Williams, actually.
Yeah.
I did hear that. So, look, all that remains to be said is, Weldon, again, thank you very much for your expertise and your time, and certainly for that offer for all our viewers. We do really appreciate it, and we wish you every success, not just with Copenhagen Wolves, but just for yourself, because you're a damn nice bloke. Carl as well.
I've always liked you too, Richard.
I get that a lot.
You're about to like him a lot.
I'm the CEO of MYM.
I know, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
Sounds like Yamoto Cannon. But Carl, as well, seriously, all the best for Copenhagen Wolves. They're an organisation that are very dear to me, very close to my heart. I've been around since they were formed, and they are, for me, Denmark's premier organisation. I love the Danes. So I really want them to do well. And
Who doesn't?
Yeah, good. So best of luck, and I hope you do manage to put SK Gaming on tilt. I'm watching. And of course, Ram, thank you for your thoughts as always as my co-host. You're going to really like this next bit. You're going to really like this. One of our regulars made a picture for us, which I've sent to Sam. I need to remember who made it. I think it might have been Nitrous.
Oh, it's Nitrous.
Yeah, I hope so. If I've got it. Oh, sorry, no. It's my favorite troll account on Reddit lol pro. My bad. He quickly photoshopped us within a Game of Thrones context, and you will notice, Ram, that you are Varys. You are the bald eunuch, which I thought you would particularly like. So there you go.
You know what there is to say about that is that guy's probably going to survive the entire show.
He's going to be in charge at the end.
While you're all fucking dead, I'll be like
who am I, by the way?
Fucking scheming. You're dead. You're just
dead. I think you're just that creepy guard in the background, just looking at Ram's ass.
Yeah, I would never do that without payment.
but you can see.
I know. I love this picture. I retweeted it. It's so fucking great. But why am I fucking Varys?
You are.
Why am I a fucking random? I should be the
sorry, dude. I'm sorry. I can't help you. I didn't.
You actually do look a little bit like Peter Baelish. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, no. I
like
you know what's funny? I didn't notice at first that Baelish's face had been removed. I thought I don't remember him in season 1 not having a mustache.
Yeah,
I really did. So yeah, you have got a touch of the Baelishes about you, which I must say, Weldon, is not a reflection on anything you might do professionally. So people don't need to.
And he really engages in the mental warfare as well. So that's perfect.
Hopefully you've never pushed anyone to their deaths. A bit of a spoiler.
Spoiler!
Fuck it. If anyone says spoiler for something that's been on TV for like more than a week, you're an asshole. Get fucked.
Hashtag big sorry.
Yeah, if you cared, you would have watched it. Suck a dick. All right, so anyway, that has been First Blood. So thanks to everyone, co-hosts and guests alike. Thanks to all of the viewers. And we will be back next week on our regular time of Wednesday, 10 o'clock UK time. And no doubt we'll go for another crazy show. I hear Sky Williams is going to come back on for round 2 with Ram. But best of luck to all the guys competing in LCS. That was it. We're all going to do our thing now. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Peace.
it.